Hey everyone, Jamie here. Welcome to Flame Bearers Unedited, a brand new series bringing to you largely unedited conversations. We heard you loud and clear. You want to hear more stories of more elite women athletes from around the world. So we're going to deliver. In Unedited, we're going to bring you completely unfiltered conversations. We hit start, we have our conversation, we hit end. What we're going to see, though, is slightly different because we're not going to have all the traditional bells and whistles that you're used to in Flame Bearers production. So let's jump in.
Hi, my name is Celina Toth. I am a Canadian Olympian in the women's 10 meter of diving.
Amazing. Celina, how did you get into diving?
Well, I did a lot of sports when I was a kid. Parents put me in everything. Started off with picking daisies, playing soccer, and then eventually found my way to gymnastics. I wasn't the greatest, I was provincial level, but I don't think I'd ever make nationals. And I was doing a skill on the beam and I had hurt myself, and my coach was like, well, you have to compete that. So when I came back and could train, I had a competition a week later, and he was forcing me to do that skill. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. So I told my parents, I was like, I'm not ready. I understand pushing, but this is not it. And they were like, okay, well, see through the year, got to stick with it. You made a commitment, so see the year through and then we'll reevaluate. And I saw the year through and I was like, no, I'm done. So they made me go tell them myself, 12-year-old, going to tell my coach, who was a Romanian Olympian, that I'm done. And then we had a couple of other coaches supporting him that were like, oh, why don't you try diving? And I was like, okay, sure, why not? And she was a diver herself. And I didn't even know the sport existed at the time. And so I quit on the Monday, called on Wednesday for a tryout because I was pretty acrobatic in gymnastics. And then I tried out on Friday and I was on the team on Monday, and it was just straight shooting from there. And I walked in my first day on my tryout and I saw 5 teammates that had quit gymnastics that I never thought I'd see again, that were all just there. And I was like, cool. And, some of them got scholarships and went off to the US and got degrees and stuff. And so it was just a really cool transition. And I remember driving up to the pool, and it looks like in London, Ontario, it looks like this big spaceship that's coming out of the ground. And I remember being like, Dad, I want to go in there. I don't know what that is, but I want to go there. And so when we were pulling up to the pool, I was like, this is it? This is where I get to go every day?
I go in the spaceship.
Yeah. It was so cool. And and then it just took off from there.
So nearly over a decade of being on the national team later, you became an Olympian and totally have, smashed all these records and everything. Connect the dots for us. So how did you go from that first practice to where you are today?
I've never been asked the question like that. That's a really interesting way to put it. And it's it seems like it flew by in an instant, but thinking about that first day is, God, ages ago. But I remember I just was like, I could do a flip off, going onto my feet was super easy. Transitioning to your head, I was asked that first day to do a front 1.5, and I was like, nope. I could do a dive, but I couldn't do 1.5. And I was like, no. And then obviously it came pretty easy. And in Ontario, I was provincial champion in most age groups for quite a long time. So I started later. Usually when you're a diver, you start early, young, maybe even 5. And I was 12.
Wow.
So I was halfway through junior already. And I had a lot to learn to catch up. So I never thought that I was going to, make the Olympics or even make the national team. It was just whatever. And then I ended up being really good and winning all these things. And my first
amazing.
My first big thing was being invited to Olympic trials in 2008 here in Victoria for 3 meter. And I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I got the invite on my birthday. I was like, this is sick. I'm so excited. But I had to go on my own. Like, none of my teammates were invited. So me and my coach went, and he was just like, I was one of the youngest there, like super innocent, don't know anything. And I made the final. And I remember being like, to my friends back home watching, I was like, watch my hand on my last dive or whatever, like watch my hand. And I like waved to them on the camera. Like, it was so funny. And to come from like just trying to have fun and enjoy it and do well to, okay, I'm at Olympic trials. Like, oh my God. And then 2 months later, it's junior nationals. So our big event. And I was first year A. So it's like the toughest age group for girls, I would say. And also you have 3 years in it. So if I'm first year, I'm competing against girls who are not only 1 year, but also 2 years ahead of me, who are senior level, like going to senior international competitions. I'm like, what's going to happen here? Didn't expect anything. And I won. That competition will forever be the best. I get chills thinking about it, talking about it, telling the story. But came out of nowhere because I was a springboard athlete, and all of a sudden I went on platform. So that was weird. And then the day after, I did well on 3 meter. I was third, I think. And then I'm on the national team. And then I never wasn't internationally competitive. Like, I just wasn't that good. And so I was like, what's going to happen here? And then I was deciding, like, I think at that point that year, being at Olympic trials, having dove with the athletes, winning my first thing, I was like, all right, I want to go to the Olympics. I think that's when it clicked for me. And I was like, hey, how am I going to do this? Do I go down to the US? Do I stay here? Do I go to Montreal? Where do I go when I graduate? I couldn't stay in Ontario. I think we just didn't have the facilities to elevate myself. When I moved to Victoria, we got access to weights. We got access to mental health. You get physio. I never, ever saw a physio from 12 to 18. I never stepped in a gym. I didn't know what I was doing. We didn't have nutrition, like none of that. So when I moved here, you got access to all that. We had a dry land facility in our pool. I didn't have that. You pull the nets out every day. You'd pull the trampoline out if we wanted to use it on the pool deck, set it up. Like, it was crazy. So, and then eventually we did have a gym, but you'd have to travel to it and then travel back. And so it was a bit of a mess. But we did the best. We obviously did a good job because we had another national team member that year that I won as well. And very successful athletes come out of there, whatever they wanted to be successful at. A lot of people get university degrees coming out of there. So that's amazing. And so then I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to the US because everybody's getting hurt. So I'm staying in Canada. To stay in Canada and go to school and train, I had to make the national team so I could get funding. And otherwise, like, I'm not going to school. And so it came down to like one last opportunity. I missed national standard by like half a point, a quarter of a point, 3 points, like a ton of times. And
you must have been sweating bullets. I'd be freaking out.
It was the last opportunity, and I finally got the score. So I got to go to my international competition to then I had to get the score there as well to be able to be on the national team. And it was actually pretty easy. It was weird. I did really well there. I got the score. I was like, yes, I get to go to school in Canada. I get to keep diving. This is great. And I ended up moving I had a choice between Montreal and Victoria. At the time, they are the best clubs in the country. And I didn't speak French, didn't really get along really well. Like, a lot of the Montreal people grew up together, right? So anybody coming in was very difficult.
Outsider.
And at the time, I was the only one staying in Canada.
Wow.
So I went over here in Victoria, and it was the best decision. For me, it was a long ways away from home. I didn't have my family. It was very hard, but and I wasn't the best one. I was never the best one. But I know that I got there. I was the oldest diver to ever qualify for their first Olympics in Canada at 28. And it just, was a testament to my character in that I was never giving up. I was not going to let anybody say no, that I wasn't good enough. In my time, I was too fat and I'd never get the scores I deserved because of the way I looked, and I didn't have a strong enough backbone to be competitive. Because I like to cheer for everybody and I'm sensitive, and I just got everything under the books of no, it's not going to be you. And then COVID happened and I was like, ugh, what do we do now? And because of all those things being told to you for so long, I was like, I just want them to cut it. No Olympics, let it go. And then it won't have been my fault if I didn't make it.
Yeah.
Which is makes me really sad that I thought that, because that's not who I am. I'm such a fighter. And then in the end, it ended up being the best thing that could have happened to me, because physically I was ready. It was the best I'd ever been. I was ready to go. But mentally, I think that was where I was lacking, because you couldn't train the mental piece. You can just get your body physically ready, but you can't train competing when you're not competing, right? So that was just my downfall, I think, coming into the Olympics. But I don't regret a thing. It was the most craziest career, but definitely worth it.
Thank you for walking us through that, Celina. You said a couple things that I want to circle back to. So you mentioned, things that people had said to you, that you looked a certain way, that you were too supportive. Share some more of those. What are some of the things that you had to basically be like, no, that's not me, I'm going to do my own thing? Share some of those with us, because very rarely athletes actually, first of all, are vulnerable enough to share things that people have said to them that don't make them feel good. And you found a way to not buy into any of them, it seems like.
Well, it was hard. It took a long time. So that story is a fun one.
Oh, goody.
It was in 2013, something like that. I don't know. I was 22, 23. And I was going to a competition. It was nationals in Winnipeg, the coldest place on earth. Horrible. And I was getting ready for the final. And I had done well. And so you have a 20 to 30 minute warm up. And so I usually do most of my stuff, and then I get out, and then 5 minutes before I'll do my first lead up for my first dive, and then 2 entries, and then we start. And so in that time frame of I've warmed up, I'm waiting for my last 5 minutes, a judge had come up to me as I was walking over to get into the pool to start my last 5 minutes. She goes, "Oh, Celina, you're so good, but you and me, Weight Watchers online, you're never 20 pounds. You're never going to get the scores you deserve because of the way you look." And I was like, oh, okay. I'm going to go compete now. And then I turn around and keep walking. And then another judge stops me and he goes, and also these 2 judges are very prominent, and I'm over it. I don't hold anything against them. I totally understand going back to the first judge who said that I was fat. This woman is so strong and has been through her own hell, excuse my language, through her career. And so I understand where it was coming from. Clearly delivery, not great. But now that, I've had time to reflect and I'm much older, I can understand. But obviously at the time I was like, all right. So then I go to the next judge and he's like, when are you going to start doing harder dives? You've been doing these dives for a really long time. When are you going to do back 3.5? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go warm up now. See
Another great pump up speech. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
So I don't remember how the competition went, whatever. But I just remember being like, I have to tell my strength coach that this happened, and he's gonna be livid. And I was fine. At this point, I let it roll off my back. I had to compete, whatever. I got there and I told him, and he lost it. And that's when I started crying, realizing how serious it was. And then luckily I my parents are super supportive. My mom's in mental health. Like, she ran an eating disorder clinic. So like, that was something that, actually, funny enough, my parents also worry about themselves sometimes and how they look. And so I think they were worried about me and how people would judge me if I were to ever get bigger. So when I was a kid, it didn't matter. But when I went away to school and would come home, they would worry and be like, oh, should you be eating that much? Or should you eat that? And so it felt like it was a negative thing to me now, because I have all this coming at me too. But I'm like, and I know, just because they've been athletes, and so I get it. They're caring about me, but I also don't think they fully understood how that was coming across to me. Even though my mom worked in eating disorders, it was like a very interesting dynamic. Now I think she sees it and definitely takes that into her work. And I was lucky. I never found myself falling into any patterns of eating disorders. I definitely get into a groove of I don't whatever, I'm gonna eat Subway today, and then I might eat unhealthy or whatever stuff that's not fueling my body properly for maybe a week or two, and then I'll be like, oh, gotta get back on track. So for me, it wasn't ever binging or anything like that. It was just not fueling properly. And so I went through almost a year of well, why am I going to competitions if I'm just going to be judged for how I look and not my actual diving? This is dumb. And competition was my favorite thing. I would so much rather compete than train, because you get to see all your friends from across the country and the world and cheer them on and watch good diving and, watch bad diving. And it was just fun. And I also, by that judge that called me fat, got mad at me a couple of times internationally because I'd cheer for other people. And she's like, you got to cheer for your own teammates. And I'm like, no. I'm going to cheer for any dive I think is good, or any friend of mine. I started to realize maybe I'm in the wrong sport, because I'm the biggest team, biggest fan, anybody else's biggest fan. And I'm in an individual sport. So I'm like, man, maybe I should have been on a team. I don't know. But I think that's what's unique and special and drew me to diving too, is because it's so small and we're all so close and we all bond over fear. So it's strengthening. And I definitely could not have gone through my career without the support of my friends across the world. So
I can't believe she said that to you. Thank you for sharing that. How do you let that roll off your back? So you mentioned a couple of times that, things were said to you and you must have had to develop a really thick skin. So words of advice for people who are currently battling stuff like that being said to them too, and how you were able to keep going.
Yeah. Well, first, I had that support system, immediate support system in my family and my friends and my teammates. My coach was on the other side of it. He definitely wasn't supportive in the appropriate ways. He was more... it's such a difficult thing when you're a male coach dealing with female athletes who aren't necessarily good at that or comfortable with those types of conversations, and approaching it in the correct way. He was very harsh. And he'd never, in my opinion, never had to deal with this. He only had one other female. Everybody else was boys, so it never mattered. And she didn't get to the point that I was, she had quit before we got to this point. So he didn't know what to do. So one example, we went to a restaurant, and I had finally, sorry, I'm going to backtrack before I get to that part. I went through the whole year, and at the end of the year, I was like, I'm done. At Nationals, I was like, I'm quitting. I can't do this anymore. And then I got invited I did happen to do well, and I got invited to a Grand Prix. So another international competition. It was my favorite place in the world, Italy, Bolzano, Italy. We dive outside in the mountains. It's incredible.
Wow.
So I did well. And of course, I was like, kind of brought me back a little bit. So I was going to wait until December that year. So like see the year through, because I didn't have anything else to do. I'm still in school. I don't have any friends or family in Victoria yet. Like, what else am I going to do? I'll dive. So then our technical director of our sport found out through my coach that I was thinking about quitting and why. And so then he was like, no, we didn't have much coming up at the time. So he was not going to let me quit. So he came over to Victoria and he was like, what do you need? What do we do? Let's build this team for you. So now, not only do I have my parents and friends at home, I have sort of my coach who's kind of on board, a nutritionist, finally, a sports psych, finally. Strength was being brought into the fold. We had it, but we didn't all work together. And so I finally had this, and physio. So I finally had this team that was working for me and to make me the best. And it was definitely a challenge with my coach and making sure that, the appropriate things were being done and being said and we were following the right things. But what had happened was the technical director had come down and said, this is what we need you to do. You got to, basically from January to May, you have to lose 20 pounds. And I had a sheet, I still have this, of every day. So January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, all the way to May. The next column was how much my weight.
Wow. And
I had to weigh myself every day. And I'm supposed to match what the weight says for that day. And my nutritionist, later, she was like, okay, this isn't going to work. So don't get discouraged if we don't lose 20 pounds by May. Once we don't have to do this anymore, we'll figure it out. And I was like, okay, because I don't know.
Yeah.
And the biggest part was getting comfortable with the process and the people and learning. If you don't find somebody you connect with, especially in a nutritionist, when this is something that's so important for you in the sport and to fit in and to get the scores, it was really hard not to lie about if I did the wrong thing. Or if I went out drinking with my friends one night, or that I probably shouldn't have, or I had, pasta 3 nights in a row or whatever, and I'm supposed to be writing a food log. And sometimes I'd be like, oh, I had a salad when I didn't. Mm-hmm. And so it was getting comfortable in that sphere and recognizing that these people actually want to help me rather than me feeling like I have to be protecting myself.
Yeah.
So that was really hard, but once, we got through the stuff I needed to do and actually focused on what my body needed, everything changed.
Wow.
And I got to that point where I told my coach, we were at the restaurant and I was given rules. If you get a protein and if you can't finish the whole meal, that's fine. Take it home and eat it an hour later. You still need that protein. I was like, okay, that's easy. Go to a restaurant. Of course, when you're traveling with sport, you go to yucky places. So I got the best thing I could. I didn't finish the entire chicken breast because it was massive. So he was like, the waiter was like, do you want to take this home? I was like, yes, please. My coach was like, nope, she's had enough.
Oh.
And I was like, no, I haven't. I'm allowed to take this home. He goes, no, you've had enough. I'm like, no. This is part of I'm allowed to take it home and eat it later. And he was like, nope. And multiple other things happened that weekend just to embarrass me. And so when I say he's obviously, his heart or his mind is in the right place. He just doesn't know how to do it appropriately. That's what I mean.
That's a great example.
But also he wasn't interested in being a part of that process with me either. He didn't care to learn the rules. He just wanted me to do it. So making sure that I found the right people to do the right thing was the biggest piece for me. And then I did change. My body did change in a healthy way. It was still big. It's just my body type. I was the strongest female platform diver in the world. And sorry if that's not going to look the way you want it, but eventually, clearly I made it to the Olympics. Clearly I was doing the right things. So if it's something that you just have to have that team around you to help with the right knowledge on how to do things and that click with you. I had another nutritionist before this one that I would not tell her anything that was true, but I just couldn't. I liked her. She's a nice woman, but we just didn't.
Yeah,
vibe,
not a fit. Talk to us about where you are today. So I know you mentioned there's been some changes for you.
For us, technically, there is no off season, but usually in the summer, after the big meet of the year, we kind of cool down. So, but this year we had Pan Ams in October. So we had to be qualified in the summer and you had to be ready to go. So no off season for me. So it was going to be tough to make it to Paris. That was the goal. You know, I, after 2020, 2021, I had gone down to the US to get a degree and coach and continue diving, but it wasn't as, I didn't know where diving was going to take me. And then I was at SECs and I watched some of my teammates from home competing at SECs and I was like, no, I'm not done.
I'm not done.
So things didn't work out there. That was a mess, a toxic, abusive situation. So I came back to my old toxic situation. And that coach and I ended up, after that season, I had 4 weeks to qualify for Commonwealth Games and any other events that were happening for that year. And it didn't go well for us in our relationship. So he tried to convince me to quit, but I wasn't done. So I just said, thank you. I'm going to go in a different direction. We've learned everything we could. Like I have my things with him and it's definitely a struggle, but I wouldn't have got to the Olympics without him. So I definitely respect that part of him, like the technical piece of who he is and what he can provide as a coach is incredible. But for me, a lot of the rest of it, of what you need to be a coach and a leader, is missing. And so I was like, from here on out, like, I'm doing this for me. And clearly you aren't also doing this for me. So time to move on. So I went and I looked around to the rest of the coaches across the country, but that wasn't provided as an option for me. So I had our 2 coaches here, our 2 assistant coaches at my club, offer to coach me. And they had a plan. They came to me. It was awesome. And I was like, yeah, I'm in. So we were going to go to Paris, and that was the plan. And then, you know, I'm 30 after the Olympics. Like, it's so hard the older you get in this sport. Like, that's why women don't last this long, especially on 10 meter. Men can go longer on both boards, but you find the oldest athletes in diving on springboard men, women springboard. And so I was up to this last season, I've been the oldest female 10 meter diver in the world. And the other 2 of my age are a couple months after me, but I'm going to own that one. Because Candelela from Malaysia, who's an Olympic medalist, was like, I'm not retiring until she retires because she's older than me.
Amazing.
And it was just a funny joke that went around. But I was like, okay, I'm getting ready for Pan Ams. And then Pan Ams was a bust. Everything about it was awful. A teammate's mom who I was very close to, had passed away the day we got there.
God.
And I thought that I would get, one more time to say goodbye. And that didn't happen. And then I ended up running into athletes that I had been assaulted by in the past that I never thought I would see again. And that kind of created this new anxiety that I after Commonwealth Games, when I come back from the US that year, finally started taking some anxiety and depression medication, which definitely helped. But now, since I'm on that medication, I'm finding all of these things. I'm recognizing anxiety now. So I definitely had an anxiety attack there. And in the prelim, and I haven't felt supported by my sport teammates, yes, but my sport, like my coach never gets to go anywhere because I'm not, my previous coach had said it's time for me to quit, and that was a NSO sentiment. So also the sport agreed. And I was like, well, tough. So when I go to these events, competing for Canada with my NSO, I don't feel supported.
Yep.
So all of it just piled on, and I don't remember prelims. It was probably the worst competition of my career. Somehow made the final. I did better in the final. I'm very proud of myself for having come out of that. But it was after that, it was like, okay, can I do Paris? Can I make it there?
Yeah.
My coach, a learned behavior of mine is when my coach yells at me, my body will respond. But that's something I don't love either, being yelled at to make a correction. It's not, especially when you're an adult. Okay, maybe when you're 10, 11, 12, don't really know what you're doing and they're getting frustrated. Yeah, they're going to yell at you. Okay, whatever. Not that that's great, but as an adult, a 31-year-old or 30-year-old, you do not need to yell at me to get to say, hey, you're continuing to make this same mistake. So I had now diving with my coaches who respect me and trust me. And I, vice versa, got to a day where I was having it was an easy day, horrible day. Started yelling at me. And then I made the correction. And I had already that was my second dive of that day. I personally had already blown up at myself for the previous dive and then made it work. And then they blew up at me. Not like it was bad. It was just like, hey, you're not doing this. Like, cut it out. And I'm like, whoa, okay. And then every dive I did after that was perfect. So they called me over, and that was the beginning of, am I actually retiring? And we sat down and we talked for about 45 minutes, and we were all crying. And Jorge, one of my coaches, is a 2-time Olympian, was 4th at the Olympics at one of them in his event. You know, he went through it all. And he gave me his experience. He gave me some other experiences. And he said, when you were injured at the beginning of this season and had the opportunity to go to the last event of the last season, and we weren't ready to go, and you said, that's fine, that was when he knew that the transition had started for me. I didn't know yet, but he already knew, because me turning down going to an event, big deal.
Yeah.
So we sat there and he's like, and I said, I'm honestly getting scared of doing my easy dives. And he was like, yep, that's part of it too. And so we just realized, like, it wasn't coming. Retirement was happening. And so I had to make the decision. And of course, like, my family's wanted me to quit forever. Like, they want me to move on with my life. And my boyfriend thought I would quit after Tokyo, and he was super excited about that, but obviously would support me in any decision that I wanted to do. So he wasn't going to say no. Even though that's definitely caused, rifts and things in our relationship for sure. And so Jorge was like, go back, talk to your people, talk to your dad. He seems to make a lot of impact on you. But I didn't need to. I already knew their answers. So it just had to come from me. And I talked to my sports psych, and she was the last person I talked to, but I talked to a couple of other people. And then every time we started bringing that up in that conversation, she was like, okay, well, what do we do now to get to whatever, or to get to nationals? Because nationals was December, and this was like end of October, beginning of November. And every time we talk about that, it would turn into talking about the end. And so it was just easy. I was like, this is happening. I want to go to nationals. I want nationals to be it. I want to go out on my own terms. I want to have fun. Every time, the last 3 years, you go to an international competition or a national competition, and it's miserable.
But that's a sign.
Everybody else is miserable. So I made that decision the next day. After I told everybody I needed to tell my coaches or whatever. I just told my people. So like Diving Canada didn't know. My other old coach who still coaches at the same pool didn't know. Just my 2 coaches, my strength coach, my nutrition, like that
your
small
people
group. The next day, my diving went back to being as good as I was when I was diving at the Olympics. Like, and it was so hard the last 8 months, I would say. Like, I was getting so frustrated with myself that I can feel the perfect back twist. My best dive, I can feel it. I can see it. Can't do it. No matter what I did, I tried so hard, I couldn't do it. And it was getting embarrassing and sad and heartbreaking because I love this dive and I know what it feels like to do it well, and my body just wouldn't do it. And so as soon as I made that decision, my body did it.
Came back.
I was like, this is garbage. Come on. And then we get to nationals and I had a blast. It was so fun. Everybody else was nervous as all hell.
Like, and you're like, I'm free.
Yeah, it was World Championship Trials, which is the last Olympic qualifier. So it was a big deal. And you could just feel the tension. It was ridiculous. So I told my teammates that I'm very close to so that they could be in it with me. And then I told 2 other competitors, one who's traveled the world with me, and I would never have made it as far as I did without him at those meets. And my competitor, Kaylee Mackay, who I did synchro with once, which I thought might be another avenue for me to try to get to Paris as well. But they didn't give me that opportunity. But she's been also through hell and back with me. So I told her and she was like, I knew something was up. You've been way too happy all week. And I was like, yeah. So I just wanted you guys and she dove after me in the event, and I just wanted you 2 to know.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. I did my prelim was amazing. And she came up to me and was like, so your score was good.
And you're like, I made my decision. Nope.
Yeah. So a bunch of people who, like my coach, I said to her, I'm like, so if you could go to Worlds with me and I qualified, would you go? And she's like, do not do this to me. And I'm like, no. The minute I thought about coming back to Victoria after nationals, after Christmas, and diving again, I was like, nope, anxiety through the roof, like cannot do it. So another sign. And then when I did my finals was horrible because I just could not keep my body in check, my emotions. And my last dive was like 2s on my back or on my face, like whatever. But it was fine. I didn't even care. I showed up the next morning to watch the final or the men's 10 meter, like eating an ice cream at 10 a.m. I was like, yeah, like it just felt so right. And it still does. Like, it sucks. Watching World Championships was fine because I didn't qualify. And of all of the competitions in the book, that's the only one I didn't go to. Wow. I went to
everything else.
Tons of World Cups, which is the same thing. World Cup is the same thing as a World Championship, just it's only diving, not all of the sports, but it's the same level of competition. The Olympics is the same thing. Pan Ams, Commonwealths, they're all the same. Worlds is the only one I didn't do. Bummer, but whatever. But it didn't bother me watching them compete. This last weekend, they had a World Cup in Montreal.
And
I was supposed to be there. I was invited to that based off of my performance for last year. So I earned that myself. It wasn't we have spots for Canada, come. And I obviously had to turn that down because I was retiring. And watching that was hard because I was supposed to be in it. And then watching, everybody get excited and cheer for everybody and me not be there or see new people come up, who I mentored or like just, whatever. That was hard. But I know I'm in the right space. I know that I can't do any more for myself. And that was why I came back. And if I wasn't going to be able to do it, then what was the point?
Yeah.
And I saw my career through. Nobody, no matter how many times I was told, nope, you're not the one. You can't do this. You can't do that. I stuck up for myself. I stood up against my coach, against the NSO, and I qualified for the things and I went. And it didn't matter how I did. I was just doing it because I wanted to do it.
For you.
And
wow.
Yeah. So I got to go on my own terms.
Thanks for tuning in to Flame Bearers Unedited. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a positive review on your favorite podcasting platform or YouTube. If you want to see more behind the scenes coverage, follow us on social media. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, whatever platform you're on, we're there too. Thanks, and we'll catch you on our next episode.